Hi everybody, welcome to A Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is probably my favorite one. It is how to be the worst course student imaginable and still make it home. The worst course student. Been doing this for a long time, and this seems to be an undercurrent that has to do with the whole ego view of us and our own belief in that we're sinful, right? We're sinful and therefore have this experience of guilt that we try to get rid of. And that is the basis for this inherent unworthiness that we don't let come up. We kind of push it down. It rears its ugly head here and there. We see it in other people, we see it in the world, but we don't quite want to acknowledge it in myself, right? That's why some of the workbook, for example, lesson 93, Jesus says, the lesson's name is light and peace and joy. Light and joy and peace abide in me. And then in the first sentence, he says, you think you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Right? That's what we believe we are. In one sense, if you would have an overriding principle of the ego thought system, then this is it, right? You are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. You are not the home. Light and joy and peace do not abide in you. You are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. That will be the ego's overriding message to us, right? And there's a purpose in this message. The reason why the ego gives us this message is because if we believe it, and only if we believe it, will we stay with the ego. So the ego's greatest value is our sinfulness. And the ego is nothing really other than a part of ourselves that made the separation real and now believes it is possible to actually do it. And the ego keeps us with it because it needs the power of the Son of God to exist. It keeps us with it through this belief in evil, darkness, and sin, right? In sin. So the overriding premise and promise of the ego is that we are eternally sinful. And this world was basically made to cover up this belief in sin within ourselves and transfer it magically to the outside, so that the outside is the sinful place and the inside is the clean one, right? That is there to counteract our belief that we are the sinful ones because we believe we have killed God, that we have shattered the love of heaven, the oneness of eternity, and it all broke down, it fell apart because of our wish to be separate for one instant. So the ego's goal is for us to forever be believing in this sinful state of ours. So the log line, if you're a writer, you always have to, if you're submitting a manuscript, they always want to have a log line in which the whole manuscript is condensed into one sentence. The log line the ego has for us is, you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. This will not change. It can't change because the ego cannot exist without our power, and it ensures that we continuously choose the ego while we believe in this sin. very natural progression of believing in sin is choosing the ego continuously, right? And obviously this belief in sin, we can sometimes feel, we feel this slight unworthiness or slight not quite deserving, right? Ken always talked about the second-class citizen, right? That we believe we are second-class citizens. The Bible expresses that in the way that Jesus is the Son of God and we are the stepchildren, right? We're not quite worthy of God's love. And the proving that point lies in its opposite, because if we don't have the love of God right now, if we don't experience this incredible peace right now, it is because we don't believe we are worthy of it, right? This sin leads to guilt. This guilt leads to this incredible fear that we have of joining, of this oneness of God. And this fear is generated by this unworthiness. We believe we're unworthy of this love. And it is obvious, and it has to be clear to everybody that this belief in sin is what dictates our lives for the most part, right? We might not be aware of it, but whenever we have any kind of judgment about anyone, this judgment is the direct effect of the cause, which is this belief that I am the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Without that belief, I would not have to judge. There's a beautiful, very short sentence in chapter 6, section 3, the relinquishment of attack. It says, without anxiety, the mind is wholly kind. Without anxiety, the mind is wholly kind. Without fear, the mind is wholly kind, right? And fear can only come if we project guilt outward. So to trace the steps back, you could say without guilt, the mind is wholly kind. Gets one step before that, it says without sin. Without the belief in sin, the mind is wholly kind. Without the belief that I am the home of evil, darkness, and sin, my mind would be wholly kind. Unkindness can only come from our belief in sin, that we did something terrible, right? And we can see that sin outside. It is easy to see it on the screen of the world, but to pull that back and say, wait a minute, if I see it out there, it must be in me. That belief that I think that politician is sinful, or that world leader is sinful, or that leader of a terrorist group is sinful. In order for me to believe that, I must believe that I am sinful. Otherwise, I would not see it outside. I can only see outside what I first have denied within myself. So, and we shouldn't be surprised that we bring this belief, which is all-encompassing once we're with the ego, into our study of the Course, right? We cannot but, because the reason the Course is there is for Jesus to tell us, listen, look at this belief, but look at it with me and I will tell you it is not true. So, of course, we read the Course and we practice the Course with this belief, this deeply rooted belief that we are the home of evil, darkness, and sin, that we have sinned, that we are guilty as charged, right? That is what we bring to the Course when we read it. one way of the one expression of that thought connected to the course is that we feel slightly ashamed or kind of unworthy, feel like a failure if we can't do what Jesus tells us to do. Right? If we try to do the workbook lessons perfectly, that must mean we believe the ego that says you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Otherwise, we would not try to do the lessons perfectly. Right? So, how to be the worst possible, the most failing, the biggest loser when it comes to the course student on the planet? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Because I think it's something we have to, at some point, admit to ourselves that, yes, we're trying very hard to do what Jesus tells us to do, right? And here's the thing. We make ourselves believe that we can do what he says because not doing what he says would mean annihilation. Because we believe we're the home of evil, darkness, and sin. In order for us to not be that, we try to do what Jesus says. So, for example, when he says, see the Christ in your brother, right? We make ourselves believe that we actually can see the Christ in our brother to avoid the realization that, first of all, we don't want to see the Christ in our brother at all. Otherwise, we wouldn't need this course. Right? We need this course because we do not want to see God in somebody else. We want to see our guilt in somebody else. So the reason why we need this course opposes our thinking that if we do what Jesus tells us to do, we will be innocent and God will take us back. That's the whole Christian ideal, is to do what God tells us to do and what Jesus tells you to do, you know. And I'm going to give you an idea now that is completely counterintuitive. You're going to say, oh my God. Right? Maybe you won't say that, but deep down we think it because I still think it. If somebody says that to me, I'm like, whoa. I'm going to tell you that Jesus wants you to be the worst course student possible. He wants you to not do what he says. He wants you to actively not do what he says in his book. Become the worst course student on the planet. That is our way home. When Jesus says, see the Christ in your brother, right? That's a big example. He knows we can't see the Christ in our brother. We have no concept of seeing the Christ in our brother. We have no concept of the Christ. We think it's seeing our brother in a little bit of a light. And we make this light within ourselves magically and put a little light on that brother and think, oh, we're seeing the Christ. We're doing what Jesus says, because deep down we believe we have to do what Jesus says because we're so guilty and so sinful. We have to do what Jesus tells us. And Jesus says, I dare you today and from today on, all day, every day of the rest of your life, do not do what I tell you to do but don't judge yourself for it. So when he says, see the Christ in your brother, that is, I believe, in the first part of our journey, an inspiration that there is more to see in our brother than our guilt. Right? He says, try to see the light in your brother. And in the first part of our journey, we try to do that. And it sometimes works a little bit. And because we believe in our sin and our guilt, we believe, oh yeah, I can do it, right? I can see the love in my brother. I can see the Christ in my brother. I can see the light. But we're still doing it while we think we're guilty. We try to be good girls and boys. We try to be a good course student. We try to say, God, listen, I'm reading your book. I do what I can. Right? I'm trying to be really good this time. And Jesus says, don't do that. Be a Course in Miracles rebel. Be the resistance. Because you're resisting me anyway, he says. Your whole life is based on resisting my love. And the proof for that is, do you feel it? Do you feel my love right now? Or throughout the day? Do you have this incredible, vast, overwhelming feeling of my love within you? Yes or no? If you don't, it's because you're resisting it actively. And then you're reading the Course and you think you see the light in your brother. Let me tell you, you don't. It's good in the beginning to get the concept of what it means, right? That there is a light in your brother. But then the second part of our journey, Jesus tells us, look at how much you don't want my love. Do this course terribly. Be the worst course student. Forget the lessons. Forget thinking about God. And then you remember that you forgot to think about God, and then you come to me and you say, listen, I forgot about God all day. And Jesus is in heaven saying, yes, he got it. She got it. They got it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do the workbook as good as we can, as well as we can, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to follow what Jesus says, but we also have to realize that that's not what Jesus wants from us. In the beginning of the journey, that's what he wants from us. He says, try out my thought system for a while. Get used to it, get into it, right? It's like a rehearsal in theater. We're in Tech Week now. We're no longer in rehearsal. Right? We are now in just before the performance. The rehearsal is the first part of our journey where we try to implement what Jesus tells us. Try to see the light in your brother. We try to see light in our brother. Okay, I get it. I get the concept. The mistake that we're making is we think the light we see is the Christ, right? Because it sounds so beautiful. The language is so beautiful. And we feel so guilty that it's like, oh my God, I can see the light. I'm not doomed to hell. Right? That's why it's so important to have that. But then it's almost like we have to let go of our training wheels and ride the bike by ourselves, realizing that Jesus is always there to catch us, right? When we fail. And this is the part of our journey when we look at our failure. We look at how much we don't want to do his course. We look at how we use Jesus and how we use the Holy Spirit and how we use God still from a place of sin and guilt. And he says, that's fine, but just realize what you're doing. Right? Bring that to me. So in lesson 95, which is I am one self united with my Creator. Beautiful, beautiful lesson. Right? It's one of those things where we can almost glimpse what that means. The only problem really is when Jesus says, I am one self united with my Creator. That's an impossible sentence. Because the I, right? I can't be myself and be one with my Creator. Myself as my ego self that I think I'm reading this course with can't be one with my Creator. So Jesus must be speaking to us, a part of our mind that is not this thing that we believe we are, right? He's telling us something that he knows is impossible for us to grasp. He's always just leading us towards that. But he doesn't expect us to grasp, I am one self united with my Creator. We have no idea what this is. Right? We can't conceive of one self because everything in our lives, our brain, our experience, our whole thought system, the world with everything in it is made to deny that this I am one self united with my Creator. So we can't grasp it. All that Jesus can do is open the door to the, what do you call it? To prepare our mind to accept that. And then he says in paragraph 2, and that's what I'm talking about with the sin, guilt, and fear, he says, you see yourself as a ridiculous parody on God's creation. Weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful, miserable, and beset with pain. Such is your version of yourself, a self divided into many warring parts, separate from God, and tenuously held together by its erratic and capricious maker to which you pray, which is the ego. That is our image of ourselves. And Jesus knows that, right? But we try to deny that this is our image of ourselves. We try to make it happy, and we try to say, no. This image, this sinful, ugly, vicious, weak, miserable self is outside of me in the world. And Jesus says, no, this self is what you believe you are. Whatever you see in the world is nothing but you, right? It does not hear your prayers, for it is deaf, the ego. It does not see the oneness in you, for it is blind. It does not understand you are the Son of God, for it is senseless and understands nothing. That is our ego mind, the part of us that still believes the separation has happened, right? So that is our mindset when we read the course. You see yourself as a ridiculous parody on God's creation. And this is a painful phase of our journey, but at some point we have to look at that and realize, oh my God, that's what I think I am. Right? That's why we want to make the course into something perfect for us, that we really want to do it right, but we can't. And we are not quite ready to fully accept ourselves for that. But that's what Jesus asked us. He says, listen, what I want to hear from you is you telling me I cannot do anything you're telling me in this course. I'm totally confused. I have no clue what you're actually saying. I think I get it, and then I'm like, should I do this or that, or what is it? Should I follow the workbook or the manual or the text? It's all sometimes different, and it kind of seemingly opposes each other. What should I do? And I can't do it. I cannot do it, Jesus. Please help me. And he says, okay, now we can start. Now we can talk. Right? When we get to the point when we realize, listen, not only do I not understand it, I don't want to understand it. I do not want to do your course. I want to do it my way, which is I want to be on the surface, do a good job so that I think I'm not guilty anymore. Right? But below that, as he says, you see yourself as a ridiculous parody on God's creation. Weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful. Weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful. That's what we believe of ourselves. To deny that was, up until today, or when we started with the course, our primary objective. The focus of our lives is to deny that we believe we are the home of evil, darkness, and sin, weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful. You know how hard it is for a German to say weak, vicious in one sentence? Because I want to say weak and vicious. If you read it like that, it sounds actually funny, so it's good to read it that way. See yourself as weak and vicious. Yeah, ugly. Miserable. Anyway, so that's in one sense, Jesus says in the second part of our journey, listen, you did well so far. You did the course as much as you could, as best as you could, but you're not home yet, right? And we have to answer, yes, I'm not home yet. And he says, okay, so let's go a little deeper, and let's look at some of those passages that are a little bit more challenging. The one sentence, for example, is what is not love is murder, which means everything is murder. Right? What do we do with that sentence? It leaves us in the end in a state where we think of ourselves as a ridiculous parody on God's creation, weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful. That's what we believe we are. And that is this belief that we need to bring to Jesus. Amen. Right? So the first level of this, if you can think a little bit of levels, right? The first level is, I'm trying to do what Jesus asks me in the course. Right? I'm trying to be a good boy, a good girl. I'm trying to be a good course student. Right? Then we realize slowly and with much hesitation, because you have to realize, in order to actively realize we failed, Jesus' course means I am a parody on God's creation. Because Jesus says you're the Son of God, you can do this. And if I say I failed, that means I'm guilty. So I can't fail this course. And Jesus says, please, please fail it. Fail this course with everything you have. You're Captain America of the course, of the failing course. You're the Avengers of the failure. So in this second level, right, first we try to do what Jesus tells us to do. In the second level, we begin to realize, albeit very slowly and hesitantly, our inability to follow his guidance. Right? When Jesus says the Holy Spirit guides you to see your brother sinless. And because we're so guilty and sinful, we say, okay, yes, I can do it. I can see my brother sinless. That's the goal of the course, right? And Jesus says, no. The goal of the course is not you see your brother sinless. The goal of the course is you realize you do not want to see him sinless. Because you want him to be guilty. And the reason for that is because you believe you are weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful. That's your belief, and that belief is what I need from you. When, I don't know if you have the two gifts. Let's see if I have it. have it here, but the two gifts that Helen, the gifts of God, right, that Helen, the poetry of Helen Schuckman, in the end, there's this prose poem, I think it's 12, 13 pages, where it says the gifts of God. And it's basically a summary of the course in an incredibly beautiful language. And basically Jesus says, listen, the two gifts, here's how our exchange works, right? You don't give me the good stuff. I don't need all this stuff from you. I need the ugly stuff, the viciousness. I need your sinfulness, your misery, your pain, your weakness. I need your belief that you're sinful. That's what I need from you. And in exchange, I will give you the peace of God. But if you try to give me your gift of, I'm a great course student, I can't give you anything because your hands are still full of that other stuff. Right? The viciousness. Right? So he can't give us anything because we're not giving him anything. We're giving him something that's good, which isn't good because it's still based on how sinful we believe we are. What he wants is that belief that he says here in paragraph 2 of lesson 95. That is our gift to him. And his function in our lives is for us to take those gifts and show it to him and say, look at this with me. I must believe that I am the home of evil, darkness, and sin, that I'm vicious, ugly, sinful, and weak. Please look at this with me. That's what he wants from us, right? So our inability to follow him, it must dawn on us at some point, and that together with then the next layer is to actively look at our resistance to follow what he says. If he says, see the sinlessness in your brother. The first layer, I'm trying to do what he says. I see the sinlessness in my brother. Okay, it's working, right? It's working. He doesn't care about that. He knows we're not seeing our brother as sinless, because if we would, we wouldn't need the course anymore. We would see everybody as sinless, right? We can get little glimpses and we work towards it, but the working towards seeing our brother sinless is to realize the second level, our inability to follow him. We are unable to do what he says, and that is the most honest and healing sentence we can tell him. Say, Jesus, I am unable to do what you tell me to do. And he says, welcome to my course. Right? When I was 12, 13, every Friday I would get 3 Deutschmarks as an allowance. And I would spend those 3 Deutschmarks after school at 1:45, because our school ended at 1. At 1:45 in this tiny little movie theater in the city I grew up in to watch Kung Fu movies. Every Friday. There was a bunch of boys. And one of them was my favorite, where this one guy tries to get into the Shaolin monastery to become a Shaolin monk, right? And you couldn't just get in. You were sitting there for like 5 days, rain, hail, sun, anything. So that the preparation to get actually into the training to become a Shaolin monk was this crazy starvation situation where only the really strong survived, and then they were let in. And after those 5 days, people would come out and give bowls of rice, and everybody would take the rice and eat it, except the main character, the hero of the thing. He wouldn't take it because he knew this was still part of that test. So he was the only one that let in, and then the training started. And I feel like it's the same with the course, right? We have we're outside the monastery, or outside Jesus's castle, right? And we do what we believe he wants us to do for a while, which is very important to do. And then at some point we realize, wait a minute, he's not really looking for me to do what he wants me to do. He's looking for me to realize how much I don't want to do what he wants me to do. And that's when we get this inkling of freedom. It's like, wow, I can be a Course in Miracles rebel. I can be on the rebel moon. I can be a counter force to what Jesus tells me. Right? I don't have to be the good boy anymore, or the good girl. I can be a rebel. And I can say, Jesus, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I hate you. We all must come to the point where we realize we hate his guts. Because he's the innocent one, and we can't really pin it on him. So that means we stay the guilty one, and we can't stand it. Right? And we made him into an idol. We worship him, which means we must hate him because he has something we don't have. And if he has something we don't have, he took it from us. So he took the innocence from us, gave us the guilt. That's why we hate him. We don't love him. So that's why he says, I need you to look at your hatred for me. I don't care about your love. Your love is there. It is the only one thing that is real. But right now you believe in something else. And that something else you don't want to look at. And he says, I want you to look at it with me. Don't look at it by yourself. You'll be horrified. You really believe then you're weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful, and you think it's real. If you look at it with me, you will learn that it is not real. But you have to look at it with me, not alone. Right? So this step, looking at our resistance to follow him, our active, full-blown resistance that says, no effing way, Jesus. I will not follow you. Because if we wanted to follow him, we would be with God right now at peace, 100%, loving everyone in our lives. If we don't love one person, we resist the whole of love. There's no little bit of being pregnant. There's no little bit of having the peace of God. It's one in one, everything or nothing. So we go through this, we realize our inability to follow him, slightly dawns on us, we're horrified, because we still believe we're sinful and guilty, right? Paragraph 2. We start slowly, very, very resentful, like, wait a minute, whoa, Jesus, right? I don't want to look at my resistance against you. That goes against everything I've learned. If we're slightly Catholic, forget it. Right? Looking at how much we hate Jesus we're getting back in touch with our guilt. If I hate Jesus, I'm a bad course student, I'm a bad person. God is gonna kill me right away if I admit that I don't like Jesus. And he says, please tell me you hate me. He's like the opposite of a lover. Right? The lover asks us, do you love me? And Jesus says, do you hate me? Please tell me. And the moment we say yes, the whole Lord of the Rings orchestra comes in. Right? The most epic music appears in the background. Angels give high five to each other. Right? Oh my God, this is so bright. Sorry. Okay, so third level, right? Looking at the resistance. And then, just as the ego has this overriding principle for us, which is you are the home of evil, darkness, and sin, Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the right mind and God and the oneness of heaven's expression in this world, in this mind of ours here, is that the Son of God is guiltless. And it says that in the course, in the manual for teachers, who are God's teachers? First section, paragraph 3. There's a course for every teacher of God. That means this is not the Course in Miracles is for every teacher of God. There's a course for every teacher of God. You can be a mailman and you can be a teacher of God. You can be a cop, you can be a judge, you can be an attorney or a surgeon, or you collect garbage for people. It does not matter where we come from. There's a course for every teacher of God. The form of the course varies greatly. This course is one of thousands of different forms. Otherwise, how would dogs attain their oneness, right? The mind that has identified with the dog, they can't read the course. Would they be able to go home? They don't know about forgiveness, whatever. But so the form of the course varies greatly, right? So do the particular teaching aids involved. This book is a teaching aid, nothing more, right? It is a teaching aid. There's nothing holy about it. You can rip out pages, you can sleep on it, you can do whatever you want with it. It's a teaching aid, just like any other teaching aid. This water bottle is a teaching aid. If the person at the counter of the store, I say, hey, listen, can you give me this water bottle? Or I ordered this on Amazon, actually. If the person who wraps that into those boxes and ships it to me is with Jesus at that very moment, this is a teaching aid for love, right? The same as the course. The course is just for people who are a little bit more intellectual, who believe in, Freudian terminology, are Christians, maybe love Shakespeare. Who cares, right? Doesn't matter. It's just one of 1,000. So the form of the course varies greatly. So do the particular teaching aids involved. Nobody has the same teaching aid. Even within the course, there are 1,000 teaching aids because we're not on the same level. And those levels aren't like this, they are like this, they're circular, right? We're just on different spots on our journey, and some sentences speak to one person, another person says, I don't know, I don't even know what this is. I love the next line, right? That speaks to me. So within this one teaching aid, there are thousands of ways to teach it. But here comes the crux of it. The central theme is always, so the central theme of this and the course and anything out there is God's Son is guiltless, and in his innocence is his salvation. That is the overriding premise of Jesus for us. So if we read the course and we just can't do it, we don't understand it, we want to take this book and throw it on the ground, right? Like Ken Wapnick always mentioned to us when we were in Roscoe, he says there are many, many course books at the bottom of Lake Tanana Lake. Because people, they go to workshops and they say this effing book and they throw it into the lake. So there, he says there are course corpses in Tanana Lake. Still to this day probably dissolved by now. But that's, right, that is whenever we see ourselves or feel ourselves not able to do what Jesus says, right? When we're slowly getting to the point of this, looking at our resistance, we must look at it with Jesus, who always says the Son of God, the central theme of my teaching to you, he says, is that the Son of God is guiltless and in his innocence is his salvation. That is the central theme of this course, right? The danger is that we apply this in the abstract. We just look at this line and say, oh, the Son of God is guiltless, in his innocence is his salvation, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. If we don't apply it to paragraph 2 of lesson 95, that we believe we are weak, vicious, ugly, and sinful, it will not do anything. So we must have both there. We must bring ourselves from this, through this, to here, to looking at our own resistance, our utter terror of what it means to see the light in our brother. We are terrified of that light. We resist it with everything we have. This world is a massive, massive defense mechanisms, 10,000 walls with labyrinth and fire spouting dragons and acid rivers so that we don't get in touch with love. So just having this without this means nothing. If somebody tells you today, you're guiltless, we don't even know where it's sinful. It doesn't mean anything. We have to realize first, paragraph 2 in lesson 95, that's what we believe, right? And then we apply this. And Jesus says, bring me all this, what you think, you see yourself as a ridiculous parody on God's creation, bring this to me, and then I can tell you, you are innocent. And in your innocence is your salvation. Nothing else is your salvation. Innocence is the only salvation you have and the only salvation you will ever need. You will need nothing else. Any addiction, this is the cure, the only cure, a real cure forever is God's Son is guiltless and in his innocence is his salvation. But we have to apply that to what we actually believe about ourselves. Just this sentence does not help. Right? We must apply it. The application of this principle onto our resistance. And then we have both. And then we can say, we can have an informed decision. And the informed decision is not just the Son of God is guiltless. The informed decision is, on one side, I believe I'm ridiculous parody on God's creation. I'm weak, vicious, ugly, sinful, miserable, beset with pain. This is the version of myself. I look at that. And then I look at Jesus' words that say, you are guiltless and in your innocence is your salvation. And we bring those two thought systems together. Right now we're trying to tell that we have them apart. We're here. Right? We're looking at this and we're trying desperately to go like this. But this is still pulling us back. The attraction of guilt opposes the attraction of love, as we learned, right? So we're trying to look at this innocence, at this sentence. But we're not getting anywhere because this is still pulling us this way. So what he says is, bring those two together. And then and only then can you make a choice and realize what the ego thinks of you is a brilliantly conceived, highly sophisticated illusion. And what I present to you is the truth. So if we bring the two together, because one is true, the other one is false, once we bring them together, the false one must disappear. There's no more choice. The choice is only to look at it. In the end, there will not be a choice between those two, because the illusion will evaporate and leave the truth standing, that you are the innocent Son of God. Right? But if we don't bring them together, if we keep them apart and say, okay, whoa, I don't want to be guilty, I want to go to Jesus, right? Oh, but this is holding me back, so blah, 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 and then we go back and forth. We must look at them like this. We must bring them together. And how this works is we see this paragraph 2, for example, and we realize what we think about ourselves, that when we look at a brother outside and we see darkness, we remember the line, this darkness is in you. We realize that, we bring it in, and we ask Jesus, please look at this with me. Am I really guilty? Yes or no? Tell me. And we're afraid of the answer. Because we really believe we are this home of evil, darkness, and sin. That's why we're not asking Jesus. We're not asking Jesus, am I innocent? We're asking him for a parking spot. We're asking him to fix things in our lives. We're asking him to tell us where to go to find a cab. Because we're too afraid to ask him, am I guilty? Because we think he's going to say yes. Because we still believe we're guilty. Right? Why could we expect another answer? And that is what we need to pull those two together and say, this is what I believe about myself. And this is evidently what you're telling me I am. Eventually, they can't both exist. Truth and illusion cannot coexist. That is the whole overriding metaphysical premise of the Course, is that truth and illusion cannot both exist. Oneness and individuality cannot coexist. If I bring truth, if I bring the illusion to the truth, the illusion will disappear. So the overriding principle when we fail this Course miserably, we're like, I can't do it. I can't forgive. I can't let go of this anger, of this hatred, of this frustration, of this problem. I have this problem for 30 years. I can't get rid of it. You realize that problem is there on purpose. There's a purpose, as we've done in other segments. There's a purpose of this problem. And the purpose is always, in one way, shape, or form, the resistance against love. And the counterforce, or the salvation, is us asking Jesus, am I really guilty? And he will say, God's Son is guiltless. You are guiltless, and in your innocence is your salvation. And he can teach that by actions or thoughts, in words or soundlessly, in any language or in no language, in any place or time or manner. It does not matter. But the overriding principle of the Course is that we are guiltless. And we can apply that to our lives with the Course when we fail it. Right? When we have the feeling we can't do what he says, and most importantly, we don't want to do what he says. Right? I saw the light in my brother once today, but it was so long ago, and then there was lunch and it was so great, and then I met my girlfriend or my boyfriend, and then I made some money, and then I lost some money, and I got hurt, and I was happy because I binge watched something on Netflix. Right? And the overriding principle is that we're guiltless. Whether we watch TV or not makes absolutely no difference. We can believe we're innocent and we watch a show, or we can believe we're guilty and we watch a show. The show means nothing. Right? What we use it for is what means something. And if we can acknowledge to Jesus, listen, I'm watching this show because I really don't want to be with you right now. I want to block you out. Go away. The moment we say go away to Jesus, we're doing the Course. That is the only thing he wants from us. The rest is just preparation and fluff around this one single focused thing. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, God, peace. I do not want to have anything to do with you. And we can say it in iambic pentameter. Or we can yell it, or scream it, or shout it. I do not want to be with you. Otherwise I would be. Right? If I have the power of decision, if I'm not with him, I don't want to be with him. So pretending that we want to be with him does not get us anywhere. It's part of the resistance. But looking openly at this, looking openly at that, I don't really want to do what you're telling me in the Course, Jesus. I really don't. Sometimes I do, but most of the time, if I'm perfectly honest with you, nope, not for me. Even though I'm crying while I can't do it because I feel so miserable and in pain and all this other stuff, right, that you say on lesson 95, in lesson 95. And his answer, he doesn't answer this, he answers this. You are guiltless. Because the reason for our resistance is the guilt that comes because of the sin of the belief in separation. And he says, you are not guilty. That's his answer. All right, I'm going to read 2 paragraphs. Also lesson 95 as a closing. It's paragraph 9 and 10. When you fail to comply with the requirements of this course, you have merely made a mistake. This calls for correction and for nothing else. To allow the mistake to continue is to make additional mistakes based on the first and reinforcing it. It is this process that must be laid aside, for it is but another way in which you would defend illusions against the truth. Let all these errors go by recognizing them for what they are. They are attempts to keep you unaware you are one self, united with your Creator, at one with every aspect of creation and limitless in power and in peace. This is the truth and nothing else is true. Today we will affirm this truth again and try to reach the place in you in which there is no doubt that only this is true. All right, thank you so much for watching.